Hey everyone. I know things are pretty raw right now.
Yeah,
That election result.
it's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot to process. And that PDF you sent over,
Yeah.
um, it really shows you're grappling with this. You're trying to find a way through it, searching for some kind of reassurance that
Yeah.
things won't always feel this heavy.
It's completely understandable to feel that way. I mean, these
Yeah.
kinds of shifts, they can really shake us up. What I find really interesting is that urge you have to look back at history for comfort. That's something humans have been doing for centuries.
Yeah. So you're saying diving into the past can actually help us deal with
And
this
like,
very present, very awful present.
hmm
Because right now, honestly, history feels more like a horror movie marathon than a source of comfort.
I hear you. But think of it this way. History gives us a bigger perspective. It shows us how societies have faced challenges before, how they've navigated uncertainty, and how they've ultimately come out on the other side.
Okay, I'm willing to give it a shot. So where do we even begin? Your PDF mentions Trump tapping into a very specific kind of disillusionment, particularly in rural communities who felt like the economic recovery after the pandemic left them behind.
You're right on the mark. The PDF really highlights that feeling of being forgotten of the system not working for them, and that feeling that's powerful fuel for a populist leader. We've actually seen this same pattern play out in the 1930s during the Dust Bowl.
The Dust Bowl, like the devastating drought and those iconic photos of farmers migrating west.
Exactly. Back then, farmers were struggling to survive, facing economic hardship, feeling abandoned by the government. Sound familiar? It was this very desperation that fueled support for populist leaders, leaders who promised radical change.
Wow, so Trump's rhetoric about being a champion for the forgotten man. It's a page straight out of the populist playbook.
Absolutely. And just like those Dust Bowl farmers, many people today are looking for someone who understands their struggles, someone who promises to shake up the system. But here's where things get even more interesting. Your PDF also analyzes some of Trump's recent speeches and points out how he uses specific language to create an us versus them dynamic.
You mean like how he constantly talks about the elites and the deep state being against the everyday American?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That kind of rhetoric, it's incredibly effective
Yeah.
because it taps into existing anxieties and creates a sense of urgency and fear. And if we look back at history, we can see how figures like Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi propaganda minister, used similar tactics to manipulate public opinion.
It's chilling to think about how those techniques are still being used today,
Yeah.
especially for the power of social media to amplify them.
You've hit on a crucial point. The PDF specifically calls out how Trump bypasses traditional media and uses social media to control the narrative, which is a powerful tool in today's world. In a way, it's like how regimes in the past controlled printing presses or radio broadcasts to shape public perception. It's just been updated for the digital age.
So it's not just about the message. It's about controlling the channels through which that message is delivered. That's scary.
And what's even more concerning is that social media algorithms, they often create echo chambers feeding us more of what we already agree with, which further reinforces these divisions.
So it's like we're all trapped in our own little information bubbles, only seeing what confirms our existing biases.
Precisely, and that makes it incredibly difficult to have constructive conversations and find common ground. Your PDF actually draws a fascinating parallel to the decline of civic engagement in ancient Rome.
Wait, ancient Rome, I'm not sure I see the connection there.
Think about it. As the Roman Republic declined, people became increasingly disengaged from the political process. They grew cynical, lost faith in their leaders, and retreated into their private lives.
And that created a vacuum for authoritarianism to take hold right. Because when people don't participate, those in power can do whatever they want.
Exactly. Your PDF highlights how voter turnout, especially among younger demographics, was lower in this election. That echoes the decline of civic engagement that often precedes big shifts towards authoritarianism. It's a warning sign we need to pay attention to.
Okay, so we've got this historical parallel with the rise of populism and the dangers of civic disengagement. But what does this all mean for us right now? How do we navigate a world where the leader of the free world is someone who thrives on division and distrust?
That's the question we're all grappling with, and honestly, there are no easy answers. But I think the first step is understanding how we got here. By recognizing these patterns from history, we can start to equip ourselves with the knowledge and perspective we need to move forward.
So it's about seeing the bigger picture, understanding that this isn't just a random event, but part of a larger historical cycle.
Exactly. And by studying how societies have faced similar challenges in the past, we can find both warnings and inspiration.
So we've laid out some pretty heavy historical context. But, your PDF doesn't just dwell on the negative. It also talks about how other countries might react to Trump's return and some potential ripple effects.
It's crucial to consider the global landscape because America's actions, they have consequences far beyond its borders. Your PDF specifically raises concerns about Trump's potential impact on trade deals with China, which is something that's kept economists up at night for a while now.
So you're saying we could see a repeat of those trade wars that were making headlines a few years back,
Yeah.
tit for tat tariffs, economic uncertainty, that kind of thing.
It's certainly a possibility, and it would definitely have global repercussions. What's fascinating is that your PDF connects this potential trade war with China to the dynamics of the Cold War.
It's interesting. I remember learning about the Cold War in school. The U.S. and the Soviet Union locked in this ideological struggle. But I'm not sure I see the connection to trade with China today.
Well, during the Cold War, economic policies were a key part of the rivalry between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. Each side used trade deals, sanctions, even foreign aid as tools to try and influence other countries and gain a strategic advantage.
So you're saying that even though China isn't the Soviet Union, we could see a similar kind of economic maneuvering and power play on the global stage.
Exactly. And just like during the Cold War, other countries will likely try to figure out how to navigate this new reality. Some might see an opportunity to align themselves more closely with the U.S., while others might distance themselves and seek new partnerships. It's all about trying to find the most advantageous position in this shifting landscape.
Okay, so on the international stage, it's all about strategy and self-interest. But back here at home, I think one of the things that's really freaking people out is the role of the media and how easily misinformation spreads.
You're right to be concerned about that. The media landscape has become incredibly complex, especially with the rise of social media and what your PDF calls algorithmic content control.
Honestly, that phrase always sounds a bit like something out of a science fiction movie. Can you break it down for me?
Sure. Think about it like this. When you're scrolling through your social media feed, you're not actually seeing everything that's out there. Algorithms, which are essentially computer programs, are deciding what content you see based on your past behavior, your likes, your shares, and even how long you linger on certain posts.
So it's like the algorithm is trying to guess what I want to see,
Yeah.
and then it just shows me more of that, even if it's not necessarily accurate or balanced.
Exactly. And that can create a dangerous feedback loop, where we're constantly being exposed to information that confirms our existing biases.
So it's not just about misinformation being out there. It's also about how these algorithms can actually steer us towards it. It's like they're creating echo chambers where critical thinking goes to die.
That's a great way to put it. And when facts become subjective, when truth itself is up for debate, it undermines the very foundation of a healthy democracy.
So what can we do about it? How do we break free from these echo chambers and make sure we're getting accurate information?
Well, first and foremost, we need to become more critical consumers of information. We need to ask ourselves, who's writing this article? What's their agenda? What sources are they using? We can't just passively absorb everything we see online.
So it's about being skeptical, doing our own research, and not just taking things at face value,
Yeah.
kind of like a detective looking for clues.
Exactly. And here's another thing that your PDF emphasizes: the importance of conversation. Talk to people who hold different viewpoints. Listen to their perspectives and try to understand where they're coming from. You might not agree with them, but the act of engaging in respectful dialogue can help bridge the divides that have fractured our society.
Okay, so critical thinking and open dialogue, got it. But, this election has a lot of people worried about social justice issues. And honestly, I'm terrified about what a second Trump administration could mean for marginalized communities.
Those fears are completely valid. History has shown us that when authoritarian tendencies take root, it's often marginalized groups who are the first to be targeted.
Their rights get eroded, their voices get silenced. It's a pattern that repeats itself over and over again.
Unfortunately, you're right. And that's why it's so important for those of us who believe in justice and equality. To stand up and be allies, we need to amplify the voices of those who are being marginalized, call out injustice when we see it, and fight for a society where everyone feels safe and valued.
That reminds me, your PDF also mentioned some inspiring examples of resistance movements, like the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa
Sure.
and the solidarity movement in Poland. It felt like a little glimmer of hope in a pretty bleak document.
Those are powerful examples of how ordinary people united in their pursuit of justice can achieve extraordinary things. They remind us that even in the face of overwhelming odds, change is possible.
So, while things might look pretty bleak right now, history shows us that's not the end of the story.
Exactly. And that's a crucial point to remember as we navigate this new reality. There will be moments of despair, moments when it feels like all hope is lost. But we can't let those feelings paralyze us. We need to hold on to the belief that change is possible and that we have a role to play in shaping the future.
Okay, I'm feeling a little bit of that glimmer of hope starting to flicker again. But honestly, it's hard not to feel overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the challenges we're facing. What can we actually do? What concrete steps can we take to resist and rebuild?
That's the question we'll explore next.
Yeah.
We'll look at how people have resisted authoritarian regimes throughout history, and we'll discuss some practical strategies for staying engaged, informed, and hopeful in the face of adversity.
So we've talked about those historical parallels, the media landscape, the concerns about social justice. Um, it's a lot to absorb, and to be honest, it's easy to feel overwhelmed, even helpless in the face of it all.
You're absolutely right. It's completely normal to feel that way, but your PDF actually touches on something really important here. The danger of apathy.
You mean that feeling of just wanting to tune it all out, like
Mhm.
burying your head in the sand and hoping it all goes away?
Exactly. And historically, that's often been the first step towards authoritarian regimes gaining more and more power. When citizens disengage, when they become indifferent to what's happening around them, it creates a vacuum that allows those in power to act without accountability.
So it's like that old saying, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. Except in this case, it's not just about evil. It's about the erosion of democratic values and the rise of authoritarianism.
You've hit the nail on the head, and that's why your PDF focuses on action as the antidote to apathy. Even small acts of resistance can make a difference.
Okay, I like that action as an antidote.
Yeah.
But what does that look like in practice? What can we actually do?
Well, your PDF talks about utilizing technology to combat propaganda and misinformation. You actually highlighted this yourself,
Wow.
saying how it feels like turning the enemy's weapons against them.
Yeah, because the same tools that are being used to spread misinformation can also be used to share accurate information,
Yeah.
to fact check, and to connect with people who are fighting for positive change.
Absolutely. And remember those algorithms we talked about earlier? We can actually use them to our advantage. By actively seeking out diverse perspectives, sharing fact-based information, and engaging in constructive conversations online, we can help shift the balance away from echo chambers and towards a more informed and nuanced public discourse.
So it's not just about avoiding misinformation ourselves. It's also about actively trying to counter it and help others do the same.
Precisely. And another thing that your PDF emphasizes is the power of education. Read books, listen to podcasts, engage in thoughtful discussions with people you trust. The more informed we are, the better equipped we'll be to recognize and resist manipulation.
Right, because knowledge is power. It gives us the ability to think critically and make informed decisions.
Exactly. And here's something that often gets overlooked: the importance of self-care. We can't fight for what we believe in if we're burnt out and exhausted. Take breaks from the news, spend time in nature, connect with loved ones, engage in activities that bring you joy.
That's so important. It's easy to get caught up in the 24/7 news cycle and forget to take care of ourselves.
And remember, change doesn't happen overnight. It's a long game.
Yeah.
And it requires resilience, patience, and a belief in our collective ability to make a difference.
So it's about finding that balance between staying informed and engaged
Yeah,
while also taking care of our mental and emotional well-being.
exactly. And one last thing that I want to highlight from your PDF is the importance of community and collective action. We can't do this alone.
Right. You mentioned those inspiring historical examples earlier, the anti-apartheid movement, the solidarity movement. They were successful because people came together united in their shared goals and values.
Precisely. So find your people, the ones who share your passion for justice and equality. Join organizations, attend protests, volunteer your time, donate to causes you believe in.
It's about finding strength in numbers, right? Because even small actions, when multiplied by thousands or millions of people, can create a powerful force for change.
You got it. And remember, hope is not passive. It's an active choice, a belief in our collective power to create a better future. And that's something worth fighting for.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. A reminder that even though things might feel dark right now, there's still hope. There's still a chance to make a difference.
And as your PDF so beautifully puts it, history isn't over. We're still writing it.